I'm Richard Denning.
And I'm Timberly Denning.
In James chapter 4, the theme in James is true faith is lived out by our actions. In James chapter 4, it is filled with lots of Christian instruction, but we're going to go over and just highlight a few of those instructions today. So we want to encourage you to go back and read the full chapter and see what all is in James chapter 4.
James starts out with reasons for strife in the Christian community. He says, "What is causing the wars and fights among you? Don't they come from evil desires that war within you? You want what you don't have, so you scheme and kill to get it. You are jealous of what others have, but you can't get it, so you fight and wage war to take it away from them. Yet you don't have what you want because you don't ask God for it. And even when you ask, you don't get it because your motives are all wrong, and you want only what will give you pleasure."
James describes strife among Christians with the terms wars and fights. Often the battles among Christians are bitter and severe. The source of our wars and fights among Christians are always the same. It's our own selfish desires.
In verse 4, James gives a rebuke to Christians who compromise. He says, "Adulterers and adulteresses, do you not know that friendship with the world makes you an enemy of God?"
James is talking about spiritual adultery here. When we live for the things of the world like money or work or sports or pleasure or just living for ourselves, we become an enemy to God. Every believer has to ask himself, who or what is my God? How do I know? Well, just think about it. Where do I make my most sacrifices? That might be your God. In Exodus 20, the first commandment that God gave to his people was, "You shall have no other gods before me."
James continues on to say that God resists the proud. He gives grace to the humble. Therefore, submit to God, resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. Humble yourselves in the sight of the Lord, and he will lift you up.
Here, James reminds us that grace only comes to the humble. Grace and pride are eternal enemies. Pride demands that God bless me on my merits, but grace will not deal with me on the basis of what I do, good or bad, but only on the basis of who God is. When we are proud, we are setting ourselves up for battle against God, and that's a battle that we will not win.
Our humility puts us in a position to receive the grace that God freely gives. We should submit to God because such submission is absolutely necessary for our salvation.
Verse 7 tells us to resist the devil and he will flee from us. How do we do this? By submitting to God. If we do not submit to God, we will never be able to resist the devil and we will remain under his constant power. We must decide who will be our master, God or Satan. There is no option C.
As we resist the devil, we are promised that he will flee from us.
As Christians, we need to understand that Satan is a conquered foe. We must resist him in the authority of what Jesus did on the cross. Satan will return and he will tempt us again, but as believers, we can keep resisting in the power of the cross.
Verse 8 says, "Draw near to God and he will draw near to us." The call to draw near to God is both an invitation and a promise. It is a promise that when we draw near to God, he will draw near to us.
In verses 11 and 12, it talks about not criticizing or judging others. Scripture is clear that we are not to judge. God is the ultimate judge. And in Matthew 7, verses 1 and 2, it says in the way that we judge others, we will be judged with the same measure.
Verses 13 to 16 we are to include God in all we do and have a very humble dependence on God.
James cautions us here that whenever we make plans for today or for the future, that we are to include God. We should seek him first and ask for his guidance and direction in everything we do.
And last, in verse 17, we are given the challenge to live according to what we know in the Lord. It says, "Therefore, to him who knows to do good and does not do it, to him it is sin."
James knew that it was far easier to think about and talk about humility and dependence on God than it was to live it out. Here are the good things that James says that we are to strive for in our lifelong journey of faith.
We shouldn't live in conflict with other believers.
We should pray with pure motives for God's desires and not ours.
In this life, we will serve a master, either God or Satan. There is no option C.
Don't be proud. Don't be dependent on yourself.
Submit to God humbly.
Resist the devil in the authority of the power of the cross, and he will flee.
Draw near to God, and He will draw near to you.
Don't judge others.
And seek God first in everything you do.
We're to live out the good things that James has encouraged us to do in chapter 4, wherever we live, work, and play.
Thank you.